The Galactic Peacekeeping Station Harmony's edge floats in space like a giant metal donut with delusions of grandeur. Its pristine white hull gleams under the light of 3 different suns, making it look like some architect's fevered dream of what peace should look like in physical form. The station's motto, "Unity through Understanding," is emblazoned across its side in 15 different languages, including 3 that require interpretive dance to properly convey. First Lieutenant Sarah Chen stands at her usual spot by the observation deck's coffee dispenser, watching as a group of Maraxian diplomats take the longest possible route around the room to avoid passing within 10 feet of her. Their fur bristles in what they probably think is a subtle display of anxiety, but to Sarah, it's about as subtle as a foghorn in a library. "Oh, for crying out loud," she mutters into her coffee cup, rolling her eyes for what must be the 1,000th time this week. "I haven't even had breakfast yet. How dangerous could I possibly be?" The answer, according to her station orientation packet, was apparently extremely. Earth's classification as a death world had preceded her reputation, and no amount of diplomatic training or peaceful overtures seemed capable of overshadowing the fact that she came from a planet that actively tried to kill its inhabitants on a regular basis. A Galaxian maintenance worker skitters past her station, all 6 eyes carefully averted, its tentacles tucked close to its body in what Sarah has learned is the equivalent of someone crossing the street to avoid a questionable character. She takes another sip of her coffee, wondering if she should start wearing a shirt that says, "I don't actually eat people in Universal Standard." "Good morning, Lieutenant Chen." The cheerful voice belongs to Dr. KTX, one of the few station residents who doesn't treat her like she's radioactive. The arachnoid xenobiologist approaches her station with their usual bouncing gait, which makes their lab coat flutter in a way that would be dramatic if it wasn't so adorably awkward. "Morning, Doc." Here to study the dangerous Deathworlder in her natural habitat, Sarah grins, raising her coffee cup in mock salute. "I'm afraid all you'll observe is my desperate attempt to achieve caffeine homeostasis." Actually, KTX's mandibles click in what Sarah has learned is their version of a chuckle. "I wanted to warn you about the morning briefing." High Commander Zyx'tal is in one of his moods. Sarah groans. "Let me guess, another lecture about the superior evolutionary advantages of crystalline life forms." Worse, KTX's antennae twitch sympathetically. He's been studying Earth sports videos. He has opinions. Of course he does. Sarah downs the rest of her coffee in one go, already reaching for a refill. Because heaven forbid anyone acknowledge that humans might be good at something besides surviving unsurvivable conditions. A gentle chime echoes through the station, signaling the approach of morning briefing. Sarah watches as various species begin filing toward the conference room, creating a conspicuous bubble of empty space around her as they walk. A Vexillian ambassador actually extends their environmental shield as they pass, as if Sarah's mere presence might contaminate their carefully regulated atmosphere. "You know what's funny?" Sarah comments to KTX as they fall into step together. "Back on Earth, I was considered pretty average. Decent athlete, sure, but nothing special." Here she gestures to the wide berth everyone's giving them. "You'd think I was some kind of superhero." "Well," KTX observes thoughtfully, "from their perspective, you kind of are. Not everyone can casually drink a beverage that would qualify as a chemical weapon on most worlds." Sarah glances down at her coffee cup and smirks. "In that case, call me Caffeine Woman, defender of justice and destroyer of sleep schedules." As they approach the conference room, Sarah straightens her uniform and puts on what she likes to call her professional FaceTime to go be the scary Deathworlder ambassador of human-alien relations. At least this time she's properly caffeinated for whatever nonsense the day decides to throw at her. Maybe, just maybe, today would be the day someone other than KTX would realize that humans were more than just their planet's classification. But judging by the way the room's occupants collectively flinch when she enters, she's not holding her breath. Then again, Sarah thinks with a slight smirk, sometimes being underestimated has its advantages. Especially when dealing with certain crystalline commanders who really need to be taken down a peg or two. The morning briefing room of Harmony's Edge was about as exciting as watching paint dry in zero gravity, until High Commander Zyx'tal decided to turn it into his personal TED Talk about Aetherian superiority. The crystalline commander stood at the front of the room, his faceted skin refracting light in what Sarah was sure he thought was a majestic display. To her, he looked like a disco ball with delusions of grandeur. And of course, our natural crystalline neural pathways allow for information transmission at speeds approaching light itself, Zyx'tal continued, his voice resonating with the kind of self-satisfaction usually reserved for cats who'd just knocked something expensive off a high shelf. This gives us reaction times far superior to other species. Sarah caught the way his multifaceted eyes flickered toward her at that last part. She took another long sip of her coffee, her third cup since the briefing began. The caffeine wasn't helping her patience, but at least it was keeping her awake through what was supposed to be a security update and had somehow turned into Why Aetherians Are Better Than You, Volume 47. KTX's antennae twitched in what Sarah recognized as their equivalent of an eye roll. At least someone else was as done with this as she was. The recent sporting exhibition on Centauri Prime proved this definitively, Zyx'tal proclaimed, bringing up a holographic display of what looked like the galaxy's most boring game of tag. Our champion demonstrated reflexes that organic species simply cannot. Want to test that theory? The words were out of Sarah's mouth before her brain's PR department could review them. The room went so quiet you could hear a nanite drop. Zyx'tal's crystalline form shifted colors slightly, a sure sign she'd caught him off guard. "I beg your pardon, Lieutenant Chen." Sarah leaned forward, placing her empty coffee cup on the table with perhaps a bit more force than necessary. "A friendly sparring match. You and me. Since you're so interested in comparative biology, it could be an excellent learning opportunity." The room erupted in whispers. A Vexillian nearly passed out, their environmental shield flickering in distress. Someone's universal translator started smoking, apparently unable to compute the audacity. Zyx'tal's voice crackled like breaking glass. "You're challenging me to a duel." "Oh no, nothing so formal," Sarah smiled in a way that made several species inch toward the exits. "Just a friendly match. For science, of course. Unless you're not confident your superior reflexes would hold up against a simple organic." The color rippling through Zyx'tal's crystalline form was better than a mood ring. She could practically see his ego warring, with his common sense and ego was winning by a landslide. "I accept," he declared, drawing himself up to his full height. "We shall meet in the training facility at 1,400 hours. I trust you'll need time to prepare yourself." "Nah, I'm good." Whenever Sarah shrugged, already reaching for the coffee pot, "but 1,400 works. I should be properly caffeinated by then." The briefing dissolved into chaos after that. Sarah could hear the betting pool opening before she even left the room. A Maraxian bookkeeper was already taking odds, their fur standing on end with excitement as they worked out the calculations. "Are you insane?" KTX scuttled alongside her in the corridor, all 8 legs moving in what she recognized as their anxiety pattern. Aetherians are literally built for speed. Their neural pathways are crystalline. "Yes, I know," Sarah grinned. "But you know what they don't have? Years of dealing with Earth's gravity and a lifetime of having to dodge things that want to eat you. But, plus," she added, raising her coffee cup, "they don't have this." "That's your secret weapon? Caffeine." "KTX, my friend, humans have been using caffeine to do the impossible since before we figured out space travel. Trust me." As they walked to the mess hall, Sarah could hear the news spreading through the station faster than a hull breach. Aliens were gathering in clusters, discussing the upcoming match in hushed tones. A group of junior officers actually squeaked and dove into a maintenance shaft when they saw her coming. "The betting pool's up to 50,000 credits," KTX reported, checking their datapad. "Most species are betting on Zyx'tal, but interesting. The station's AI is putting money on you." "Smart machine," Sarah smirked. "What are the odds?" 20 to 1. "Against you." "Perfect." Sarah finished her coffee and cracked her knuckles, a sound that made a passing Jolaxian faint dead away. "Want to get rich, Doc?" KTX's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You really think you can win?" "Let's just say I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that our crystalline friend hasn't calculated for." She glanced at the time. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go drink enough coffee to make my atoms vibrate. I've got a point to prove." As she headed for her quarters, Sarah couldn't help but grin. Sometimes being underestimated was just what you needed, especially when you were about to teach a walking crystal ball that humans were more than just their classification. By 1,345 hours, the station's gym had transformed into something between a circus and a diplomatic summit. Every species that could breathe standard atmosphere was crammed into the observation areas, and those that couldn't had their faces pressed against the environmental barriers like kids at a candy store window. I think the entire station called in sick, KTX commented, their mandibles twitching as they surveyed the crowd. Even Ambassador VRXTL is here, and they haven't left their isolation chamber in 3 cycles. Sarah was about to respond when the entrance doors hissed open with theatrical timing. High Commander Zyx'tal strode in wearing what had to be the most ridiculous outfit she'd ever seen, and she'd once attended a zero-gravity fashion show. The ceremonial combat gear of the Aetherian elite guard looked like someone had taken a mirror ball, turned it into armor, and then let a 5-year-old bedazzle it. Every movement sent cascades of light dancing across the walls. The helmet alone had enough decorative crystals to fund a small planetary colony. Is he trying to blind me? Or is this some kind of psychological warfare? Sarah muttered, taking another sip from her ever-present coffee cup. She'd stuck with her standard PT gear black shorts, gray tank top, and her lucky running shoes that had survived 3 Earth years of actual Deathworld conditions. Attention, a very harried-looking safety officer Keeks burst into the room, their 6 eyes blinking independently in stress. We have a situation. The regulatory guidelines for interspecies sparring matches don't account for. They glanced at their datapad. A Class 12 Deathworlder facing a crystalline lifeform. Oh boy, Sarah sighed. Here we go. What followed was 20 minutes of the most absurd safety preparations in the history of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Keeks and their team covered every surface with so much padding that the gym started to look like the inside of a marshmallow. They installed energy dampeners, kinetic barriers, and something that looked suspiciously like the bubble wrap Sarah remembered from Earth. Is all this really necessary? She asked as a safety tech attempted to convince her to wear what appeared to be a full-body pillow suit. Necessary. Keeks's voice reached a pitch that made several crystalline species vibrate in sympathy. Do you know how many regulations we're already breaking? The paperwork for this will take decades. Decades. There, KTX patted the safety officer with a gentle leg. Maybe some coffee would help. Don't even joke about that, Keeks shrieked, eyeing Sarah's cup like it might explode. Which, to be fair, it probably would if anyone but a human tried to drink it. Meanwhile, Zyx'tal was going through what he claimed was a traditional Aetherian warm-up routine, but looked more like an interpretive dance about geometry. His crystalline form caught the gym's lights, creating a light show that had several species covering their visual organs. Your opponent appears to be attempting to activate some kind of neural disruption technique through excessive shininess, KTX observed dryly. Sarah snorted into her coffee. If that's his strategy, wait until he sees how I handle my caffeine jitters. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of safety preparations and another 15 minutes of Keeks having a minor breakdown over liability waivers, everything was ready. The gym had been transformed into what looked like the universe's most secure bouncy castle, complete with emergency teleporters at every corner just in case. Last chance to back out, KTX offered as Sarah handed them her coffee cup for safekeeping. She grinned, cracking her neck in a way that made several nearby aliens flinch, and missed the chance to teach a lesson about underestimating simple organics? Not a chance. As she stepped onto the padded arena floor, Sarah couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Here she was, about to spar with a living crystal in a room that looked like it had been baby-proofed by a committee of paranoid octopi, all because some shiny commander couldn't keep his ego in check. Just another day at Harmony's Edge. The padded arena had fallen into a hushed silence as High Commander Zyx'tal took his position, his crystalline form catching the light in what he clearly thought was a dramatically appropriate way. Sarah wondered if he'd practiced that pose in front of a mirror. Before we begin, Zyx'tal's voice resonated through the gym. I must speak of the ancient traditions of Aetherian combat. For countless cycles, our people have. Sarah stepped into the ring and assumed a ready stance. I wasn't finished, Zyx'tal sputtered, his crystalline surface flickering in indignation. Oh, sorry, Sarah grinned. On Earth, we have this saying, less talk, more action. The safety officer's 6 eyes blinked rapidly in sequence. Competitors ready? Please remember all 17 safety protocols we just. Begin. Zyx'tal launched himself forward with crystal crackling speed, clearly hoping to catch Sarah off guard. What happened next would later require the station's AI to replay at quarter speed for most species to comprehend. Sarah, operating on a combination of muscle memory, caffeine, and pure spite, simply wasn't there anymore. She'd shifted aside with the casual ease of someone stepping out of a crowded transit tube. Zyx'tal's momentum carried him through empty air. He recovered quickly. Those crystalline reflexes weren't just marketing, but the look of confusion that rippled across his faceted surface was priceless. That was acceptable evasion he managed, trying to maintain his dignity. But evasion alone does not. Sarah was already moving. To the watching crowd, it looked like she'd teleported. One moment she was 5 meters away, the next she was inside Zyx'tal's guard, tapping him on what passed for his knee. The touch was gentle, but the message was clear. Could have been a sweep. The commander's crystalline surface flashed a kaleidoscope of colors as he processed what had just happened. He launched into a series of strikes that would have impressed any martial arts master in the galaxy. Precise, technically perfect, blindingly fast. Sarah dodged them all while looking like she was barely trying. Is this KTX's mandibles clicked rapidly in disbelief? Is this normal for humans? The speed asked a nearby Earth specialist xenobiologist. Actually, yes. Their planet's gravity and predator-rich environment created significant evolutionary pressure for quick reaction times. But this is something else. What it was, though nobody but Sarah knew it yet, was the result of growing up on a planet where everything from the weather to the wildlife could kill you, combined with 15 years of martial arts training and enough caffeine to give a small elephant heart palpitations. Zyx'tal was getting frustrated. His movements, while still blindingly fast, were becoming less precise. Stand still and fight properly. Why? Sarah ducked under another strike, moving like water. Getting tired? Those light-speed neural pathways feeling a bit sluggish. The commander's next attack was a perfect combination of strikes that would have overwhelmed any normal opponent. Sarah treated it like a dance, weaving between the blows with an almost musical rhythm. She even added a little spin at the end, just because she could. This is impossible. Zyx'tal's voice cracked like breaking glass. Your primitive organic neurons cannot. Fun fact about humans, Sarah interrupted, sliding past another attack with casual grace. We don't actually need to think to react. Our bodies do it automatically. It's called muscle memory. Really useful when you grow up on a planet that's actively trying to kill you. To demonstrate, she let Zyx'tal's next strike come within a millimeter of her face. Her body automatically countered without her having to think about it, using his own momentum to send him stumbling forward. She could have followed up with any number of strikes, but instead just gave him a friendly pat on the back as he passed. The watching crowd had gone from shocked silence to intense murmuring. Several species were frantically updating their xenobiology databases. The betting pool administrators were having quiet, nervous breakdowns in the corner. But our training simulation's Zyx'tal was starting to sound desperate. The calculations showed. Yeah, about that. Sarah rolled her shoulders casually. Your simulations probably didn't account for coffee, did they? Or spite. Spite makes humans really effective. The commander gathered himself for one final, all-out assault. His crystalline form blazed with internal light as he pushed his neural pathways to their absolute limit. The attack was beautiful, perfect, and by any reasonable standard, unstoppable. Sarah stopped it with one hand. The gym went so quiet you could hear a dust mote land. Here's the thing about Deathworlders, she said conversationally, still holding Zyx'tal's fist in a perfectly relaxed grip. We're not just strong because our planet's gravity is higher. We're not just tough because our world tries to kill us daily. We're fast because being slow meant being dead. She released his hand and stepped back, dropping into a ready stance that made several combat instructors in the audience lean forward in professional interest. Want to see how fast? What followed was 5 seconds that would be analyzed by xenobiologists for years to come. Sarah moved with the kind of speed that made quantum particles feel inadequate. Each strike was pulled short of contact, but every single one would have been a fight ender. By the time she finished, Zyx'tal had logged 47 near hits from 12 different angles, and his combat computer had crashed trying to keep up. The commander stood frozen, his crystalline surface cycling through colors like a malfunctioning light show. Finally, he managed to speak. I concede. The gym erupted in chaos. Species that had bet on Sarah were celebrating wildly, while those who'd bet against her were demanding slow-motion replays. The safety officer had fainted dead away, All 6 eyes rolled back in their head. KTX was doing what appeared to be a victory dance, all 8 legs moving in complex patterns. Sarah just walked over to where KTX had her coffee cup waiting, took a long sip, and smiled. Anyone else want to discuss superior reflexes? The crowd of aliens suddenly found other places to be, creating a radius of empty space around her that was slightly larger than usual, all except for KTX, who was still clicking their mandibles in amazement, and surprisingly, Zyx'tal himself. The commander approached her with what passed for a sheepish expression on his crystalline features. "Lieutenant Chen, I appear to have made some incorrect assumptions about organic capabilities." "Don't worry about it," Sarah shrugged. "Common mistake. Though if you're interested, I could show you some human martial arts techniques. They might surprise you." "I would like that," Zyx'tal admitted, though perhaps with less caffeine involved. Sarah laughed. "No promises. Coffee is part of the training regimen." As they left the gym together, discussing the finer points of cross-species combat techniques, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best way to achieve peace wasn't through formal diplomacy or careful negotiation. Sometimes all it took was a friendly spar, a good cup of coffee, and the look on a crystalline commander's face when he realized he'd been completely and utterly outclassed by a simple organic. The station's AI, designate Aria 7, was having what could only be described as a digital field day. After the 7th request for a replay, she had started adding her own commentary track. And here we see Lieutenant Chen executing what humans call a casual dodge, though at normal speed it appears to break several laws of physics. Aria 7's melodic voice announced to yet another group of stunned observers. Note how she manages to look bored while moving faster than most species can perceive. Truly remarkable. Meanwhile, in the gym's medical corner, Zyx'tal sat on an examination table, while 3 different xenobiologists scanned him for structural damage. His crystalline form had taken on a slightly cloudy appearance, like someone had breathed on a mirror. "I assure you, I'm perfectly fine," he insisted, though his voice had a distinct chime of bewilderment to it. "Just processing." "Processing what?" exactly asked the lead xenobiologist, adjusting their scanner. "The fact that you were outmaneuvered, or the fact that your combat computer literally crashed trying to track human movement speeds?" "Both." "Neither." "I don't know." Zyx'tal's surface rippled with confused colors. "Did anyone actually see what happened in those last 5 seconds? Aria 7 has it running on loop in the mess hall at quarter speed," KTX informed him, scuttling into the medical area with barely contained glee. "There's a line 3 corridors long to watch it." The Vexillian ambassador fainted twice during the replay. The betting pool administrators had set up an emergency center in the gym storage room. The sound of arguing, calculator clicks, and occasional sobbing drifted through the walls. Apparently, calculating payouts for a match where the 20-to-1 underdog had won was causing some mathematical distress. Sarah, for her part, was sitting on one of the padded benches, finishing her now lukewarm coffee and looking about as threatening as a sleepy cat. Several junior officers who had bet their monthly credits on Zyx'tal were shooting her looks that ranged from awe to mild terror. So she called out to no one in particular. "Anyone want to grab lunch? I'm thinking the cafeteria might actually have seats available for once, what with everyone crowded in here." A Maroxian medical intern nearly dropped their datapad. "How can you think about food right now? You just violated several known laws of biomechanics." "Being awesome burns a lot of calories," Sarah shrugged. "Plus, I'm out of coffee." That last statement sent a ripple of nervous movement through the crowd. Several species took involuntary steps backward, apparently realizing that a caffeine-deprived Deathworlder might be even more dangerous than a fully charged one. Aria 7's voice came over the gym speakers, sounding entirely too amused for an AI for those interested in the technical analysis. "I've compiled a frame-by-frame breakdown of the match. Of particular note is the moment at timestamp 3:47, where Lieutenant Chen appears to exist in 3 places simultaneously. I've had to upgrade my physics models twice to account for the observed data." "That's not," Sarah started to protest, then gave up. "You know what? Sure. Let's go with that. Quantum human theory sounds way better than I really needed lunch, and this was taking too long." Zyx'tal finally managed to extract himself from the medical team and approached Sarah. His usual shimmer was slightly dulled, like a disco ball that had just discovered existential uncertainty. Lieutenant Chen, he began formally, then seemed to deflate slightly. Sarah, I believe I owe you several apologies, and possibly a new coffee machine for your quarters. Now that's the kind of diplomatic resolution I like to hear. Sarah grinned. Though I have to ask what happened to all that talk about superior crystalline neural pathways. I've decided to revise my perspective on evolutionary advantages, Zyx'tal said diplomatically. Perhaps there's something to be said for developing on a planet that actively tries to murder you. Speaking of murder, KTX interjected, their mandibles clicking in what Sarah now recognized as their trying not to laugh pattern. You might want to see this. They held up their datapad, showing the station's internal messaging system. Apparently, word of the match had spread faster than Sarah's final combination attack. The training request queue for the gym had exploded, with species from every corner of the station suddenly very interested in learning human-style defensive techniques. Oh no, Sarah groaned, though she couldn't help smiling. I've created a monster, haven't I? Actually. Aria 7 chimed in. You've created what might be the most effective cross-species cultural exchange program in station history. Also, the cafeteria has started serving something they're calling Victory Coffee. I believe it's just regular coffee with extra caffeine. But the marketing is quite clever. Sarah stood up, stretching casually and causing several nearby aliens to flinch reflexively. Well then, I guess we better go check out this new menu item. Coming, Commander? I promise to drink it slowly enough for your neural pathways to keep up. Zyx'tal's surface flickered with what might have been embarrassment, but he nodded. I believe I could use a meal, though perhaps something less stimulating than coffee. As they headed toward the cafeteria, Sarah, KTX, and a slightly dazed crystalline commander, the station seemed to shift slightly around them. The usual bubble of space that formed around Sarah was still there, but it felt different now. Less fearful, more respectful. With maybe just a hint of please don't show us how fast humans can eat thrown in for good measure. A week after what was now being called the incident, or that time a human broke physics. In less formal circles, Sarah stood at her usual spot by the observation deck's coffee dispenser, watching the station's new normal unfold. The official regulations board had been updated with several interesting additions. All human-involved sporting events must be recorded in high-speed camera mode, minimum 1000 FPS. Betting pools must account for Deathworlder variables in their odds calculations. Coffee is officially classified as a Class 3 performance enhancer for non-human species. You've started quite the revolution, KTX observed, watching a group of junior officers practicing what they thought were human combat stances. They looked more like they were trying to dance while having simultaneous muscle cramps. I know, Sarah grinned. Someone actually asked to sit next to me in the mess hall yesterday, voluntarily. Lieutenant Chen, the crystalline form of Zyx'tal, approached, carrying what appeared to be his own coffee cup, heavily modified with thermal insulation and structural reinforcement. I believe I'm ready to attempt a, what did you call it? Medium roast. Sarah tried not to laugh at how seriously he took their coffee training sessions. He'd started with what was essentially brown-tinted water and had been slowly working his way up the caffeine scale with the determination of a scientist studying a new fundamental force of nature. The gym had become the station's hottest spot, with species from every sector trying to learn human-style techniques. Most of them seemed to think the secret was drinking coffee and making sarcastic comments, which wasn't entirely wrong. Aria 7 had taken to announcing all of Sarah's gym sessions like professional sporting events, complete with slow-motion instant replays and technical analysis of how many laws of physics were being casually ignored. You know what the best part is, Sarah said, watching Zyx'tal cautiously sip his coffee. Nobody's tried to put me in a bubble suit for 3 days straight. That might be because the safety officer is still on stress leave, KTX clicked. Though I heard they're writing a fascinating paper on human velocity paradoxes and their impact on station safety protocols. Sarah smiled as Zyx'tal's surface rippled with surprised appreciation for his coffee. The station felt different now, less like a place trying to contain a dangerous Deathworlder, and more like a true example of interspecies cooperation. Even if that cooperation sometimes involved teaching incredibly fast crystal people how to appreciate a good cup of coffee. Same time tomorrow for sparring practice, Zyx'tal asked, his crystalline form gleaming with what Sarah now recognized as enthusiasm. Wouldn't miss it, she replied. Just remember what I taught you about spite as a motivation tool. As she watched her unlikely new friend attempt to master the art of casual coffee-drinking poses, Sarah couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, being underestimated wasn't so bad after all. Sometimes it led to the best kind of surprises, like finding out that the fastest way to make friends in space was to show them exactly why they should have been scared of you all along.